Stop for a moment and think about the last chocolate bar you bought. Or the last time you filled up your car with gas. Or, more importantly, the last time your paycheck hit your bank account. Every single one of those transactions, the raw cocoa from Ghana, the crude oil refined in Rotterdam, the payroll calculation for your salary, was almost certainly processed by a single piece of software. A software that runs in the background, invisible to the public, yet managing the circulatory system of the global economy. That software is SAP. It is a company valued at over $200 billion. It is used by 92% of the world's largest companies. And here is the shocking truth, most people have never, ever heard of it. This is the story of the German software giant that became the silent operating system of capitalism. To understand SAP, you have to go back to 1972 in Mannheim, Germany. 5 men, Dietmar Hopp, Asso Plattner, Klaus Wellenruther, Klaus Skyra, and Hans Werner Hector, were working as engineers at IBM. They were part of a team building a massive database system for the German chemical giant, ICI. It was a revolutionary project, a system for real-time business data processing. But then, IBM did something that would change the world. They cancelled the project. The official reasoning was that real-time processing was too expensive and too risky for the market. The engineers were furious. They knew they were sitting on a goldmine. So, on April 1, 1972, they walked out of IBM. They quit their stable jobs and started their own company in the living rooms of their homes. They called it System Analysis Program Development, or SAP for short. Their first customer? ICI, the very company IBM had abandoned. The founders were not just building software, they were building a solution to a problem they had experienced firsthand. They were solving their own pain. So, what was the core insight that made SAP so powerful? It was the concept of real-time data processing. In the 1970s, businesses ran on what was called batch processing. You collected data all day, and then at night, a mainframe computer would crunch the numbers. If you wanted to know your inventory at 2 p.m., you had to wait until the next morning. SAP's first product, R/1, changed that. It processed transactions in real time. You could see your entire business, as it happened. This was revolutionary. But the real masterstroke came in 1992 with the launch of R/3. While competitors like Oracle and PeopleSoft were building software for proprietary mainframes, SAP made a bet on open systems. They built R/3 to run on Unix and Windows. This meant that any company, from a mid-sized manufacturer to a global conglomerate, could run SAP on relatively cheap, off-the-shelf servers. It democratized enterprise software. But the genius move went even deeper. SAP didn't just sell you a piece of software. They sold you a way of running your business. They packaged best practices for every industry, how a chemical company should manage its supply chain, how an auto manufacturer should handle production, how a bank should process a loan. When a company bought SAP, they weren't just buying a database. They were buying a blueprint for how to structure their entire organization. The execution of this strategy was brutal and brilliant. By the mid-1990s, SAP was implementing its software at the world's biggest companies. But here is the catch, an SAP implementation was notoriously difficult and expensive. It was not a simple, install and run operation. It could take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. A typical project required armies of consultants. Firms like Accenture, Deloitte, and Capgemini built entire multi-billion-dollar practices around implementing SAP. Companies would spend a fortune to get the system live. And once it was live, they were locked in. The switching cost was astronomical. You could not just unplug SAP and plug in a competitor. Your entire supply chain, your accounting, your payroll, your customer data, it was all woven into the fabric of SAP's code. This lock-in was not due to a legal contract, it was due to pure integration depth. SAP became the central nervous system of a company. By the year 2000, SAP had 12 million users across 120 countries. The company was worth over $60 billion. But the founders knew they could not stop there. The 2010s brought a new threat, the cloud. The rise of Salesforce and Workday threatened to make SAP's on-premise model obsolete. So, SAP did what it does best, it bought its way into the future. In 2011, they acquired SuccessFactors for $3.4 billion, buying a cloud-based HR platform. In 2012, they bought Ariba, the procurement network, for $4.3 billion. In 2014, they bought Concur, the travel and expense management company, for $8.3 billion. These were not just acquisitions, they were strategic moves to build a complete, cloud-based ecosystem. Then came the Masterstroke, SAP S/4HANA. This was not just an upgrade. It was a complete re-architecture of the core system, built to run on a new in-memory database called HANA. The idea was simple but radical. Instead of reading data from a hard drive, HANA keeps everything in RAM. This makes data processing 1,000 times faster. A report that used to take an hour now takes seconds. But the real genius of S/4HANA is the migration. By 2025, SAP announced it would stop supporting its older, on-premise systems. This forced every single one of its 400,000 customers to either migrate to S/4HANA or face obsolescence. It was a massive, forced upgrade cycle that has generated tens of billions in revenue. It is a classic example of a company using its own dominance to force a market transition. Now, let's look at the impact. The numbers are staggering. 77% of the world's transaction revenue touches an SAP system. That is nearly 8 out of every $10 that move through the global economy. 92% of the Forbes Global 2000 companies use SAP. Think about that. When you buy a pair of sneakers, the raw materials were tracked in SAP. The factory schedule was managed in SAP. The shipment to the warehouse was logged in SAP. The retailer's inventory was updated in SAP. When you get a paycheck, your company's payroll system is likely running on SAP. When the supply chain of the world moves, it moves on SAP. The entire system of modern capitalism, from raw materials to retail shelves, is orchestrated by this one German company. And the scary part? When SAP goes down, companies stop. Factories halt. Supply chains freeze. In 2019, a single SAP outage at a major chemical company halted production for 3 days, costing them over $100 million. This is the invisible backbone of the global economy. So, what can we learn from this story? First, solve your own problem. The 5 founders built what IBM should have built. They saw a gap in the market because they were living in that gap themselves. Second, bet on openness when everyone else bets on proprietary. SAP's decision to run on Unix and Windows was a bet against the giants of the era, and it won. Third, lock your customers in through integration depth, not through contracts. Make yourself so deeply woven into their operations that removing you would be like performing open-heart surgery. Fourth, understand that your real product is not software, it is a business process. SAP sold a way to run a company, not just a tool. And finally, remember that invisible infrastructure can be the most valuable infrastructure of all. Most people have never heard of a $200 billion company that literally runs the world. But that is exactly what SAP is. It is the silent, relentless engine of global capitalism. And it is not going anywhere.